Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective, and this is my co-host Shannon Callery, who is the head practitioner of our practice. And welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So excited to be back. And I feel like we've had a couple on and off like weeks with things and whatnot, but we're back and we're rolling, and I'm super excited for today's topic too.
Yes, me too. Yeah, we've been recording has been a little hit or miss. I would say, with just a whole range of things. The weather. Fortunately, we've been able to keep up and we've still had episodes come out every week. And yeah, today's going to be a more conversational type topic. We're going to definitely share some personal stuff on this and yeah, kind of how we do this in our practice, because we do quite a bit of energy work in our practice here. So yeah, today's topic is energy healing, and we are using the term energy healing on purpose here. And you might be familiar with Reiki, if you've ever kind of dabbled in or looked into energy healing. Reiki is probably the most common and most well-known form of energy healing. So yeah, so just kind of a brief overview. If this is brand new to you and you're like, I have no idea what energy healing is, why is it beneficial? Why is it useful? Be sure to stay tuned, but I'm going to give you a little overview here first. And this is an analogy. I can't remember if I came up with this or I heard it from somewhere, but energy healing and lump topic here. We will dive into more specifics later, but energy healing basically is designed to help remove blockages, physical, energetic, emotional blockages in the body to help restore better flow so the body can heal. I like to compare it to acupuncture, because acupuncture largely follows similar principles. Now, I'm not trained in acupuncture. I have gotten quite a bit of acupuncture in my life, and I'm a huge fan. But it feels kind of similar, different mechanisms to do it. However, feels largely the same. Of really, it's helping just the energy flow, the body be in a more just a better state to be able to heal. And we really operate under the ideology that the body is designed to heal itself given the right conditions. And energy healing can be a valuable tool to help with that, because it does help move, shift, open a lot of these blockages here, depending on who you are. And yeah, help restore better balance in the body so it is in a more optimal place to be able to heal itself. And yeah, a lot of nuances in there, but I think that's a pretty good overview to start.
Yeah, and if you've ever had acupuncture before, to kind of help tie the two together a little bit, we all have like different, in Chinese medicine, we have different meridians in our body. And when we have a blockage in one of those meridians or it's out of balance, that in turn, that can make us feel like mentally and emotionally out of balance. There can be some physical symptoms from that. It's kind of same concept with energy work. We have different chakras, and when those are out of balance, we kind of feel it the same way, like mentally, emotionally, if things happen to us like traumas, those can also get like stored in certain areas and cause blockages. So it's all about creating like an energy balance in the body.
Exactly. And so this is a useful tool in the healing process. And this can be, once again, this is a useful tool if we're looking at physical symptoms, if we're looking at mental emotional symptoms, if we have trauma, nervous system dysregulation, sleep issues, mental health struggles. This can really be beneficial for a lot of people. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper. We're going to start by just sharing a little bit more about our personal stories with this. I am a Reiki level 1 and 2 certified practitioner, and I'll get into some other stuff with here too, and some of my thoughts and feelings on Reiki in particular. And yeah, so I'm gonna let Shannon go first and share kind of how she first got into some of this.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I think the biggest like thing that I struggled with was constipation. That was like always at the forefront for me. And I'm talking like not going for 6 or 7 days in a row, which if you're listening and you've experienced that, it's super uncomfortable. You know how it is. So I was doing all the things. I mean, on the nervous system side, I was going to talk therapy. I was doing it very frequently. I had seen a lot of therapists at this point. And I'm talking like high school. That's kind of like where this begins for me. So seeing lots of therapists, ventured into diet, supplements, kind of already did all the things that Western medicine could do for me at that point. And I still wasn't seeing the shifts that I needed. So I actually started with a what's called visceral manipulation, which technically isn't energy work. However, the woman that I saw was, I think she was a Reiki practitioner. So there was like some energy stuff being infused in with that. And I don't know like the best way to describe visceral manipulation. It's like a hands-on touch to the body that helps adjust and move like specific organs. I don't know if you have a better explanation of that, Megan, but that's like the best way I can describe it. And for me, it was really helping with my constipation. It was like every time I went and had a session done, I would go to the bathroom after and go the next day. But when I didn't have it, I really just wasn't going. It was the only thing that was working for me. And it was very expensive. I was young. I couldn't really afford it. So I kind of just like kept searching around for other things. And the next thing that I tried was craniosacral therapy, which again is all about like hands-on touch to the body, kind of moving, it has to do with like moving the spinal fluid and fascia tissue and whatnot. However, the woman that I saw was also an energy healer, trained in Reiki and whatnot. So I was getting like these two things at the same time. And I just found that like this type of work that I was doing on my body was like a game changer for me. It was the only thing that was making me go to the bathroom and feel some sense of relief. I laugh looking back on it, like, 12, 15 years later. What needed to happen was so apparent in the fact of I needed to work on my nervous system and regulating it and being in a calm state in order to go to the bathroom. But for some reason at that time, I just couldn't see it. So I kind of just like kept venturing into these things. And eventually I came along. I did have like one or two regular Reiki sessions, but they didn't give me that like huge shift that I was hoping for. They were really great. Good things came from them as far as like feeling more in my body and getting connected with myself, but it still wasn't like getting me where I needed to be. And I was probably in my early 20s, maybe like 23 at this point, maybe 24, and I discovered something called emotion and body code, which that is a form of like energy clearing, energy work, different than Reiki, but still all about like releasing, balancing the body and whatnot. And at that point, my eating disorder was like really, really showing for me. I didn't, talk therapy wasn't really working. I had been in it for like a year and a half. So I was like, I gotta try something different. And that's when I really, really dove into the energy work and kind of hit that realm hard. And I did like a solid 3 months, I think like every week or every other week. I was fortunate enough to have a really good friend who is trained in this and we worked together. So it was really easy for us to like meet up and she was giving me sessions and that really opened my eyes to the power of energy work because it just, I mean, it was like life changing for my eating disorder. It was the one thing, and I did put in a lot of work on my own, but this was the one thing where I like woke up one day and I just felt different. I was like, oh my God, I just realized I haven't binge ate or like restricted myself from food for like 2 weeks now. And that was like not a common thing. So that was a really big shift for me and one of the biggest things that got me into energy work. And then the next big shift that came in my life was actually working with you, Megan, and then kind of experiencing like this different level of energy healing and like this different type of energy healing. And then from there, I mean, I really dove in with like the adding in the microdosing to get like a deeper experience and really starting to unblock some of those bigger just like traumas and emotional blocks that I was never able to get to. So, I mean, energy work has had a massive impact on my life. Like, I'm always like, when someone's stuck, especially with talk therapy, I'm like, go look at energy work. Like, you need to try this. This might move the needle for you. And it's also just like a little bit, I will say it's faster, it's a faster pace of healing, but that also means that the healing is more intense. So I think that's important to add too. But yeah, that's kind of my story about how I got into it and, you know, why it's so important to me. And I love being a part of something that is involved in like the energy work and the nervous system stuff.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And yeah, really, really powerful story and really powerful experiences. And, if you are, we have mentioned the emotion code and body code before in our nervous system regulation podcast. There are books on those, and there's a lot of information out there. So we'll put links to the books in the show notes, and you can check those out too. And these are things that you can do on yourself, and they walk you through in those books how to do that. So
Mhm.
if you're looking, to just like dip your toe in yourself, that can be a good option here. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a different level of nervous system regulation, trauma healing, and yeah, especially the way I do it, which I'll certainly share here in a little bit, of just diving a little bit deeper, like what really needs to be done? Like, what are some things that need to be processed, that need to be shifted? And sometimes, that's during a session. Also, sometimes that's just an invitation for you after the session of, hey, what needs to be shifted here? Let's look at this. How can we take this and this part of your healing one step further? And what does that kind of look like? So,
Yeah.
yeah, big fan.
Yeah. Um, and I will say too, like the emotion and body code stuff is really, really great. I'll always stand behind that. But there are like different levels of things too. So sometimes and it's different for each person, but the emotion and body code work is a really good way to learn about energy and like how it works, like understanding like this is based on like a science in the fact of like quantum physics and whatnot. And that's something that was really helpful reading in those books to actually understand like, oh, this is legitimately how it works. And some people need that extra understanding too, because we know it sounds sometimes far-fetched and whatnot, which we'll talk about that in a little bit here, but highly recommend reading some of the books. Dr. Bradley Nelson is like I don't know if he's a full blown creator, if he's the one who just like ran with it. But yeah, look him up. We'll put the books in the show notes and then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, and that also really helped me. And so, kind of how I got into this. So after my car accident, I was doing all of this physical healing work. I read a book called I think now I'm second guessing myself about the name of the book. I'm pretty sure it's called The Autoimmune Solution by Dr. Amy Myers. And one of the things that she talks about in there, assuming this is the correct book, was, I'm pretty sure it is, was the fact that trauma plays a big role in autoimmunity. And this is when, shortly after I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and I was looking at, was in my late 20s and not accepting of the fact that I had Hashimoto's and didn't want to take medication, and was like, all right, well, what are my other options here? And I had already started in the functional medicine space and wasn't seeing a ton of shifts, but was still like really going hard down that route before I had really started into a lot of my work. And when I read the fact that, hey, trauma plays a really big role, and she had, the ACEs test in there, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences test. And she made a connection of, if you score, I think it was a 6 or higher, the likelihood of you developing an autoimmune condition goes up by like 80%. And I had scored a 6 or a 7. And I I was like, cool. Well, apparently I need to look into this because the fact that I scored so high and made this connection, I was like, all right, well, clearly this is playing a role. Need to take a deeper look here. And I had also been to talk therapy. I had gone to talk therapy for 10 years and never really made a lot of progress. And so I started looking for, and she also mentions in the book, once again, assuming this is the third book, that things like talk therapy aren't going to move the needle. You have to do things that are going to really like shift the brain from a subconscious level. And so one of the things that she had mentioned was hypnotherapy, and that was like an easy thing for me to search for. So I saw a hypnotherapist and who also did some energy work. I would not consider it Reiki. I don't remember, but there was some energy spirituality type work that she definitely brought in. I would consider her an intuitive. And it was a little too far-fetched for me. I also had not even like touched meditation stuff yet. So I didn't feel like hypnotherapy, I didn't feel like it worked at the time. Now looking back, I'm a huge fan of it. And I also think someone has to be ready. And if you have no sort of meditation practice and haven't and can't kind of get into more of that relaxed space, hypnotherapy can be very challenging, like it was for me. So, so I got into that. I did that for a little bit. Meh, it was okay. It wasn't really moving the needle. And in 2020, I hired a business coach. And this was right when I was launching this practice specifically, and it looked different at that time. However, it has become this. And she was someone who was in the holistic health space and had created a very successful business and was also an energy healer and used a lot of energy work. And I wasn't super interested in that piece of it. And that was probably the biggest benefit that I got out of our work together. And it was a real introduction into energy healing. We did some group sessions, we did many one-on-one sessions. And I was not a believer. I was so skeptical. My type A logical brain trauma masculine energy couldn't see past the physical world here. And when we would do sessions, I mean, just that it would move a lot. I would cry, like she'd bring things up and things that I had never shared. And I was really noticing a difference. And it was when it was explained to me that, hey, we all, as physical beings on this planet, are made up of atoms. Atoms are constantly moving and have a vibration, have an energy, have a frequency in which they are moving. And once again, this is all rooted in quantum physics. And we can shift that. We can shift that vibration. We can shift that frequency into different levels of healing, into, you can use this for manifestation, into, if we look at like law of attraction, same kind of principles here. And when I started to understand that, I bought in a little bit more. And really when I bought in a little bit more, it worked even better because I was more open to it. And so yeah, spent some time with her. And then in 2021, I went through level 1, level 2 Reiki, and that was really powerful. So level 1, if you're not familiar, is being anointed is what they call it. I'm pretty sure still, to be able to do Reiki on yourself. Level 2 is being able to do it on other people. And after the first day, and by this point, I was in a pretty good spot, and I had really stopped most of my physical healing journey. I passed a massive parasite. And I mean, it was a lot, just because it was unexpected. And I felt a massive difference. And I mean, once again, like I felt decent at this point. Like I was doing pretty good. And I noticed a massive shift and just in how I felt and my energy. And it was, I mean, really amazing. And I was doing zero parasite work. I mean, I was not doing any detoxing. I was not doing anything like that. And so went through level 1, level 2, and started, practicing for free on a handful of people before I started using it in a paid setting, and just found it to be a really valuable tool. And even right off the bat, they kind of teach you how to do it. And it's mostly the person that I had my training with was someone who did it mostly in person. And that was not was what I was going to really be doing. I think I've only done maybe two or three in-person sessions. I've not used it a lot in person, which also people who only do it in person, this blows them away. The fact that I've almost never done in-person sessions. It's almost all
Wow,
virtually. Yeah. And
that's
so,
nuts.
yeah, I'm gonna share a little bit later on how I do my sessions, but yeah, how I do my sessions is very different than anything I was ever taught, and this is what just kind of came naturally to me. And you know, I had already started opening up some intuitive gifts at this point, and this really accelerated that kind of opening, getting into plant medicine space further accelerated that opening, and I and I don't know the best way to say this. So I can say I was gifted a couple other energies, and these did happen during journeys, and then the implementation and education around how to use these came after the journey. So yes, I'm a Reiki practitioner. I'm level 2. There are Reiki masters. There's also different types of Reiki. I'm a Holy Fire level 2 is kind of the school that I came from. There are other schools out there as well. And it's all just a little bit different, but similar principles. There are symbols that are used in Reiki, and the symbols are different. We do not share those symbols outside of people who go through that training. And yeah, so for me, once I started being gifted these other energies are just like really magical. They're really light. They're very, one is very grounding. The other one's very like feminine, and it's a sacral type of energy versus a root type energy, which is the other one. And yeah, they're really beautiful for me. They feel more powerful, and I am more in alignment with those. So yes, I do use Reiki in my energy healing sessions. However, I also use other energies, and these other energies for me are more in alignment, more powerful, open up and shift more. And Shannon has been very generous in being a guinea pig for for once I feel comfortable using these energies on myself to be a practice subject essentially, and being able to use these on other people, because it is I take it very seriously in what gifts I have and what gifts I open up during sessions, and who I open up these gifts for, the strength of the energy, because all of that's really important to me. So I'm very mindful of how I use the tools I have available, and the gifts that I've been given. And I think that's really important. And if you are working with someone who is not aware of that or does not take that very seriously, I would just ask some more questions, just to make sure you're safe, in a very safe container, which is the biggest thing. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into energy healing. And now it's probably my favorite thing to do, that I do in the entire practice, just because it unlocks a lot of things. We open up a lot of things, and we see some really big shifts in these sessions, after these sessions. And it's really interesting to see the progression too as people go along, and we're doing more sessions, how much deeper we can go, how much more we can tap into. It's really trauma, nervous system regulation. It's all layered work, and it's peeling back the layers. And as we can peel back more layers, it's like what else opens up, and how can we reach a deeper sense of healing? How can we reach a deeper sense of peace and connection to ourselves? And so that's like a really cool piece for me when it comes to energy healing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I love hearing how everyone, comes into this stuff. And it really feels like for you that it was just like I feel like it was gifted to you like pretty like quickly, honestly. Like clearly this was meant for you because it was a pretty quick thing. So, but yeah, and because it is such a powerful tool that sometimes we're not ready for everything that comes up either. when I did craniosacral therapy for the first time, I think I had like 3 sessions with this woman, and I can't remember her name, but she was so, so great. She actually gifted me a stone that I have, that I still use to this day. And during that third session that we had, and this was probably like 7 or 8 years ago, some stuff came up that it was around like father wound stuff, father figure, and I just wasn't ready for it. I didn't know what to do with it, and I ended up stopping. I didn't go back and see her just because it was too much for me. Like my body was just not ready to enter all of that yet. So I do think it's important to be mindful of like what comes up for you, really like sitting with it. It might feel really scary. Usually, if it does, that means that it's something that you want to lean into more. But again, like we're not always ready to do that. And another big thing is setting intentions before you have energy work done around, like, what's your goal here? What are you looking to get from this? I feel like that's a huge part of this too.
Yeah, for sure. And just diving into like what my sessions kind of look like. And once again, everyone does energy healing differently. So find a way if you are interested in this, find someone that resonates with you. And that's, everyone's a little bit different. We're a little bit different. Their own energy is a little bit different. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way, although we will talk about some precautions and some of the ways that people can veer off a little bit that we have seen and experienced. But at the opening of my sessions, the first thing we talk about is intention. And I think for me, because I was doing energy healing before I got into psychedelics, and psychedelics, obviously, intention is so important. I was already in this boat of intention setting. This is like a guiding point. It's so important to just have something that what is the goal here? What are we trying to get out of this? And this can look different for everyone. Sometime when people come into sessions with me, they, oh, my gut, my stomach, more physical type symptoms, joint pain, chronic pain, headaches. Sometimes it's more mental, emotional, anxiety, brain loops, just being like trapped in your head. Sometimes, we're actually feeling some of the emotional things. I'm having a lot of sadness come up. I'm having a lot of anger, a lot of rage, frustration come up, and I'm struggling to process this. And then there are also other people where we're just kind of open and we set the intention of, hey, I'm open to whatever is the highest good for my healing at this time. And that is also a great intention. It doesn't have to
Yes.
be so specific, but just having some intention going into it is super, super important. So, and I guess we should backtrack here for a moment because as I'm like going through this, I'm like, we didn't talk about this yet. So because I don't do sessions in person, I do them virtually, and energy healing works just as well virtually as it does in person. Here's the reason why. So energy doesn't know space or time. If we look, once again, if we go back to the science world here of quantum physics, not that I am a pro at science because it has been since high school, since I took a science class, although the blood chemistry course brought up a lot for me. And so if we go to quantum physics, time works differently. Time and space works differently. And if you are smart enough to understand quantum physics, like super great for you. I don't. I like can mildly comprehend this piece, and that's like as deep as I can get. Just my brain can only handle that. But yeah, so energy doesn't know time or space. And so we can send energy across the world to a person right next to us, to the past, to a future event, a future person, future situation. I can send it to Shannon. I can send it to someone in Australia. Like it doesn't super matter where we are physically in this physical world because we can send energy to other people. And I'll tell you, like people who are more in tune often will feel things during our sessions, even though I'm not physically there. Not everyone does. A lot of people do. Sometimes people do. So, Shannon can probably,
I can attest to that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep, I can feel it.
Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't know time or space. So you can do it virtually. I do prefer to be on Zoom. Once again, there are, some ethical implications here that, we don't send energy just to anyone or anything. We want permission. We want to make
Mhm.
sure it is of the highest good of for me, the language that I use is the highest light, love, truth, and compassion. Sometimes that compassion is healing. So, sometimes I add the healing in there. It kind of depends on what I'm doing and what feels right in that moment. But highest light, love, and truth is always in there. Just as hey, like this is not something to really play around with because as we'll get into, yes, you can go dark with this stuff. So highest light and love. So we're setting intentions. We're on Zoom. We're setting intentions. And then for me, I like to, just because people are really busy and have a lot going on, I think doing a little bit of a grounding meditation to kind of get into the space is really valuable. So that is something that I incorporate for all of my sessions. Sometimes that's like 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes that's closer to 10 minutes. It kind of depends on what kind of session we're doing, who I'm doing it with. For Shannon, we often, block out an hour and a half at least for our sessions, and we'll usually do it close to a 10-minute meditation. But it largely depends. It just depends. It also depends on what comes through for me in that moment. I do not pre-plan any of my meditations. I have a list of binaural beats that I have on YouTube, and when I connect with someone or I'm doing it in a group setting, that's when I decide, and it's not really my decision. It's whatever comes through and feels the most in alignment for that session. That's what I choose. And then we use that to go through a little bit of a grounding meditation. And then I go off screen to do the energy work and behind the scenes look here. So what I'm actually doing is, I set aside space and I have a very particular way that I like to open and hold space that feels good for me and that has shifted over time. There have been additions and subtractions, but essentially I do wear a protection belt. I had to learn the hard way of taking on other people's energy and not having enough protection for myself. So I use a tool called a protection belt, often used in the medicine space for all of the sessions. I have a variety of crystals and I always light a candle. I have a handful. I'm just like looking at all my stuff. Like, what do I use? So yeah, crystals and I have some clearing stuff is sage, Palo Santo, sweetgrass, a variety of sages. And I'll often have a couple different decks of oracle cards, which we'll get into. I have some sprays that sometimes I'll use as a way to shift the energy. Sometimes I will microdose right beforehand. Sometimes I will use tobacco as a tool to open up space in a variety of ways. And yeah, so that's kind of what that looks like. And yeah, I work in the chakras largely. I open space for guides, beings, angels, spirits that would like to come through. I'm not super tied to specific titles. You could call me a medium. I do have people that will come through that have passed away. I do have a very strong connection to angels and other light workers and guides and a variety of beings that will come through kind of depending on the person. Once again, boundaries are set here with the highest light, love, and truth to make sure that the healing is and the space is very well protected and nothing that is not of those has the capacity to come through. So yeah, and I work in the chakras and for me, I am very intuitive. I get a lot of messages and sometimes I will see images that I do my very best to describe afterwards. Sometimes I hear things and can talk to guides or other beings that are coming through. Sometimes I know things, which is also another clear sense. Sometimes I will get sensations. Sometimes I'll hear a song that'll just like pop in my head while I'm doing the session. So, but all of these variety of messages will come through that I write down. And then I close up space. I will pull a card from one of my Oracle decks. If you're not familiar, let's dive into Oracle decks versus tarot decks. So tarot decks, I think, get a bad rep. I don't think tarot decks are evil. I think they can be used for not the highest light and love. And but by nature, I don't think they are like that. But Oracle cards are a little bit different. Oracle cards, how would you describe Oracle cards?
It honestly, it depends on the deck. Um, I'm trying to think of a way to not make this sound complicated. They're really helpful so it really does for me depend on the deck, but it helps you get clarification and maybe some direction, I think is like a good way to put it. Maybe if you're a person who's like looking for signs or just like more of an explanation about, excuse me, let me rephrase that. It also depends on the intention in the question that you're asking to. So we can use Oracle decks as a tool to get more information about specific questions or topics that we have. Maybe there's certain things that you're going through. They're kind of like an extra guidance tool,
Yeah,
I think is the best way.
yeah, I think that's a good way to describe them. Yeah, it's an extra tool that we can use. And for me, I have a lot of Oracle decks that I've collected. Most often, my most common ones, once again, I'm looking at my decks right now here. I have an Oracle of the Seven Energies. I have the Wild and Sacred Feminine deck. I have a Medicine Woman deck. I have an Oracle of the Light deck. Those are probably some of the most common ones that I will use in sessions that I really like. And once again, it's a real intuitive hit which one I use. Sometimes I know going into the session and I get that kind of intuitive hit beforehand. Sometimes it doesn't hit me until after. Often I will pull one card, sometimes it's two or three. It just kind of depends on the session. Sometimes I think, a session a couple weeks ago and I had two cards just jump out. And I was like, all right, guess we're doing two. So yeah, so I like to pull a card at the end. I think it's a nice addition to the session. I really enjoy Oracle cards. I think they're really beautiful and just, yeah, just an extra signs, extra guidance, extra support, and sometimes confirmation
Yes.
that we can get. So when I'm done, I kind of wrap up. I kind of gently bring someone back on after they've been in their meditative state, receiving the energy. And if someone can't, I've one client in particular who just has a real hard time with the meditation. So she'll often get up and she'll sit up, she'll be moving a little bit, which is also totally fine. Energy healing still works just the same. And yeah, we share the card message that came through, and then I share, all of the notes that I wrote down. And I'll let you know these notes, these messages come differently. Once again, sometimes it's like an image, sometimes it's something, an invitation to do something. Maybe it's an invitation to do some more somatic work or scream therapy, or do a special connection meditation to a specific chakra to unlock something. Sometimes it's something to journal about. Maybe it's a question of a way to dive deeper. And so these are the kinds of messages that can come through. Sometimes if I've done cord cutting, if cords have come up that have been ready to be cut, I will certainly do those during the session and share that. So yeah, that's kind of what the session looks like. It is really different for everyone, and we never know what's going to come up until we start the session. But I think that's a decent overview. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard for me as the practitioner to describe, but you've experienced quite a few of these with me. Maybe you could share a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And no, I think you really did a great job at explaining it. One thing that you didn't point out that I feel like is worth pointing out, because I have seen other Reiki practitioners or energy healers, is there's only been one other instance where I've experienced something like this, but when Megan goes over like what came up for you, it's really cool because she'll start with like going over each chakra and what comes up for each chakra. And that can be really helpful, like depending on what you're working on. And it just feels like for someone who is very like a type, logical thinking, it's nice to have it broken down that way because it gives you like specific areas to dive into. It's not like I've seen plenty of people that just give like a general sense of like, this is what came up, this is what I felt. And sometimes at the end, I'm like, I don't know where to go with this necessarily. And I never feel like that after our sessions. And that's something that like I really appreciate. So that's one big thing that sticks out to me.
Yeah, so I do work, if you're not familiar, there are, well, this is also a little bit debatable, but technically, depending on who you talk to, there are seven chakras, and we work within these chakras. This is how I work. We look at the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. And then I do some overall healing and things like that. But depending on what comes up with each chakra, at least the way I do it, it does give us some additional insight sometimes too of, just a really, I'll give you just a personal example. So, and I actually am not sure if I've shared this yet, but I do feel ready to share it now. So I maybe shared some of this. So the last like, I get now it's probably been 2 years, but close to 2 years, I've been working on a lot of sexual trauma, connecting more with my femininity, and had done a lot of work, energy healing work, worked with plant medicines. Work with all kinds of people. And I mean, for me, it was just very challenging to connect with my own sacral chakra. It was almost like it felt like a hole there. And I have experienced hormonal imbalances. And, there are certain physical symptoms that we can associate at times with certain chakras. Hormonal imbalances, especially with women, definitely sacral chakra. That's immediately the first thing that I think of. Not saying that's playing the only role. However, that is often playing a role. And yeah, just a really challenging time connecting with this. And my journey last November, I had a lot of things around being a woman, experiencing trauma as a woman, experiencing sexual trauma at an early age, of not wanting to have a child, of not, my body was physically grieving during the journey of like me not wanting to give birth to a child. And that's just not something that I've ever felt super called to do. But that knowing that my body was designed to do that, and have that capacity to do that. And having a lot of my femininity shut down early. And so yeah, and I felt that in my sacral chakra. And I was left feeling that journey unsettled, which I've shared before. And there was a lot of rage, a lot of anger specifically that was left that I just didn't know what to do with. And when I sought out external help, we did a lot of work on my sacral chakra too. We did a lot of cord cutting and clearing with, people who I've experienced sexual trauma with. And still it was very challenging. I mean, doing some like very traditional shamanic type practices around this. And it wasn't until I went to Colombia during the Wachuma ceremony, and Wachuma is a cactus, that all of a sudden it was like all of this work that I had been doing, like all of it was cleared out. And I had this like massive sacral opening and just was so connected with that sacral chakra all of a sudden. And yeah, I mean, it was like a huge, huge opening, and just it felt so different. And I was able to tap into different energies and tap into different things. And yeah, just I mean, really intense and crazy and amazing and cool. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just like really incredible.
Yeah, it's also crazy how we can like this is so different for everyone because not everyone feels called to like go do like um ayahuasca and like in all the kind of like the deeper opening things and whatnot. But or just the fact that like it took you said like 2 years, like roughly. I mean, I'm sure it was longer than that, but like just how we can go through these different experiences and then if you keep listening intuitively to what you're being called to do, which is the whole point of why we talk about like getting comfortable with yourself and getting intuitive and whatnot is because you're going to be called to like follow this path and these footsteps that'll lead you to these different places to heal different things and whatnot. So it's like finally all of that time you spent working on that led you to that one thing. and then you got the release that you were hoping for from it, which that it's also crazy because I haven't shared a lot about this either, but I also have some like sexual trauma stuff that has been really coming up since January of 2024. And so, it's nice to hear someone who's come to like an end of it of some sort and finally got to the other side and what that feels like and whatnot. And yeah, it's just crazy how everyone's journey is so different with this type of work.
Yeah, it really is. And once again, just being able to listen to my intuition and being able to use tools and resources and different forms of energy healing have played such a big role here. And yeah, for some people, I do think to just, to share this, like sometimes one session, like does a pretty good job. And it largely depends on how deep we want to go too, and how much trauma we have, how dysregulated we are, all these kinds of things play a big role here. And so it's a matter of, yeah, sometimes one session does a decent job. Just like, if we think about psychedelics, like sometimes all we need is that one journey and we are all set forever or for a long period of time. And for many of us who have a lot of trauma, who have been chronically sick or are chronically sick, yeah, one session's not going to cut it. One session, yeah, you're going to see benefits after one session. And it's going to lead you to want to go a little bit deeper, or an invitation to, maybe that's probably a better phrase, an invitation to go a little bit deeper. For me, I know, just on the practitioner side of things that, when I do an energy healing session with someone for the first time, a lot of times there are limitations, and I am only allowed to go so deep. And sometimes even things will come through, and I get the messages, hey, do not share this. They are not ready. In which case, obviously, I do not share those things. I do keep notes for myself, so that I have those. And sometimes, a lot of times, they'll come back up. But it's really, once again, it's kind of like this layering process of, as someone's ready to go deeper, we're able to go deeper and we're able to peel back more of those layers as someone's ready. Now, on the other hand, I also did a session with someone pretty recently, my first session with this person. However, they've done a lot of work already. And what was able to come through during the session was what I would consider on a much deeper level than I would usually experience with someone's first session, because they've already done a lot of work, and they were able to handle it and open, and they were capable of processing and had tools and resources and coaches and other people in their space to be able to process. And I think this is another valuable thing to talk about, where, for a lot of the energy healing work I've done, and it sounds like for a lot of that you've done, Shannon, it's not just, here's an energy session, go have fun. Like, run free. And once again, it kind of reminds me of the psychedelic space of, you can have this experience and that's good and fun. And what do you do after the fact? Like, what does your integration and implementation look like? And that's where a lot of the real work happens. And that's where we're able to shift habits, able to focus on new things that are going to resonate with us, that are going to help us heal, that are going to help us implement eating habits, mindfulness habits, doing different, going outside and grounding, doing all these different things that resonate with us and are going to allow us to heal on deeper levels.
Yeah, and that, just as we've talked about in previous episodes with like psychedelics and stuff, that integration piece is also really important for energy work. And that can look like so many different things. Like some of the things you were just talking about, seeing a talk therapist can be helpful to help like integrate whatever comes up for you. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, including myself, where when I do either some type of energy work, if it's mixed with psychedelics or not, sometimes things don't come up until like 3 or 4 days later. And you kind of like, it's not like you're sitting there waiting for it to happen. Like something just happens and you're like, oh, okay, this is probably what this meant. And then at that point, you need some extra time to like process it or work through it. So just making sure you have either like a team of people to do that with, or some tools that you can do yourself, like journaling, meditation. It looks so different for each person, but that's such a big piece to this too.
Yeah, exactly. So, so important, so valuable. And sometimes during the session, at least with my sessions, some of that will come up. Be like, hey, you're not grounded at all. Maybe spend some time, a few minutes outside in your bare feet, go hug a tree, like do something outside or with nature, with the earth, connect to the earth to be able to ground yourself a little bit more. And
Mhm.
that can be an actionable step as well.
Yeah.
So, and once again, there are a lot of practitioners who work in that way. There are a lot of practitioners who don't work in that way. If you are looking for some actionable steps, make sure you ask some questions on who you're working with. If they share a lot of that, and how do they share? I've had practitioners who share nothing, and I get frustrated as a practitioner. I want to know what came up. I know some things came up for you because I know things came up for me, and I want to know what came up. So yeah, so yeah, just ask some questions, interview a few different types of people, and that's a really great way for any sort of practitioner or coach that you want to work with. Interview a few, ask some questions. If it's the right person, they will not be offended. You got to find the right fit for you in all aspects. So yeah, super important, super valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And even doing some, this would probably be more advanced. Like if you've never done energy work before, just like putting, maybe you have like, if you're into crystals, you have a crystal that you bring with you, something to just like help protect your own energy is usually a good idea as well. But I just feel like for the majority of people, we know that this is also like a controversial thing, which we're going to talk about here now, is a lot of people think that, this is like, I don't like when this type of work is referred to as like witchery. Like that is just, I know some people like use that word and they like it resonates with them. It really does not with me. It actually makes me feel like pretty uncomfortable because it's not that to us. This is very like I don't know how to it's a way of kind of like religion for us, but not in like an organized sense. How would you describe this?
Yeah, I think we work with the light. And I think that's an important distinction and it doesn't really matter, verbiage that you want to use. Witchcraft, I think, is often associated with dark, or darkness.
Yeah.
Um, and there's rituals in that. And, we certainly can have rituals too, and how we clear crystals and how we charge crystals and, pulling cards and the ceremonies, around that, and even just the energy healings themselves. And I mean, darkness is not allowed. It is not
Mhm.
allowed in this space. It is not acceptable. There is no darkness that is accessed, that is touched, that is, yeah, it's all working in light, in love, in the highest good, in whatever that means, for healing. And I know practitioners have gone down dark roads. I've seen it firsthand. I've heard lots of stories, and if that resonates with you, great. And be careful. For me, this is not something to play around with. This is a modality for healing. And there is a lot of power, and for me personally, a lot of responsibility that goes into this. And I've had people who don't understand energy healing come up to me and be careful about what you do. And thank you. And yes, I am very careful. I'm very aware of the gifts that I have, and being mindful of those. And, for me, I am closed. My gifts are closed, the vast majority of the time on purpose. And because it's a lot, it's very overwhelming. It's also very draining if I'm too open too much of the time. And so I learned all of these things the hard way too. So I didn't have great mentors in this space as I was learning a lot of this. And so yeah, just be very mindful of, yes, this can go dark, and most of us don't. Most of us have no interest in that. We just want to help people heal. And we know this is another tool that is really amazing and beautiful and powerful to help people heal. And so that's the way we use it. But yes, this absolutely can go dark. And this kind of leads us into, if you are religious and go to some sort of building, I will call it a church for some people. If you practice out of a book, for me, for us, I think Shannon and I are on the same page with this. Religion and spirituality, uh, energy healing isn't quite spirituality. There it is rooted in a lot of science. However, yes, when you tap into and open the space for guides and angels and beings, yes, we're kind of crossing that line into spirituality here. They are not mutually exclusive. I've connected the one of the first entities I connected with was Mother Mary. I did not grow up very religious. I knew who she was. She stated her name very clearly to me. And, you know, that was someone I connected with for quite some time. Angels are common beings that come through for me. Archangel Michael's a big figure for me. For us, it's not mutually exclusive. Oftentimes if we look at like third eye and things that come up around the third eye, which are often around spirituality and, the way I describe it is just something bigger than us, whether that's the earth, just like our physical environment that's bigger than us. Sometimes this is, God, if that is what resonates with you. Sometimes this is the universe. Sometimes this is source, like light, whatever kind of verbiage that you like to use. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. And I don't think if you are religious, and it depends on your, you know, uh, on our end, I'll say on our end, it is not mutually exclusive. And just because you are religious doesn't mean you can't participate and experience the amazing power and gifts of energy work. And we're not going to try and convince you that, to not believe in God or to change your religious beliefs. Oftentimes, I've had this happen on many occasions, an invitation to reconnect with your beliefs, with whatever those are, and to tap into those again. And, if there's been some hurt or, something that has separation that has happened, an invitation to reconnect with that. And where did that come from? Can we heal some of those wounds? Because there is a lot of power in believing something bigger than us. Once again, like whether that's just like the physical world bigger than us or something, God, the universe, source, energy, whatever language you want to use.
Some type of higher power, which most people, no matter what religion you are, everyone believes that there's something bigger, there's some higher power. Like that is a consistent thought across the board. It just doesn't look the same for everyone. And I will say too, like I've had working with different people and maybe, after having a session with you or having some other type of energy work done, I've had people come to me and say like, I grew up really religious. I'm feeling like really called to like go back to praying every day. Or I walked by a church the other day and I felt like really called to go in and go back to church. It looks so different for everyone. And that's the whole point of this. Like, it's all about figuring out what's the best thing for your highest self in you as a person. Like, what's going to guide you? No one's trying to. I know that there's some people out there who seem like maybe a little bit, I'll use the word culty, and like are trying to pull you into different things. But like, what energy work is about, when I think about it, and with a little bit of spirituality mixed in, is just about like figuring out what's best for yourself, how to guide yourself, and use that to help yourself heal. There's no like convincing of anything. And of course, if you don't feel comfortable with something, like that's something that you need to lean into and kind of figure out on your own. I do think that I did grow up religious. I grew up Catholic. And of course, like anything energy work was like demonic pretty much. Like, nope, don't do that. You're crossing into something that you don't want to. Granted, here I am feeling the best that I've ever felt in my entire life. And that was the thing that helped me. So sometimes we have to just like follow the signs and kind of open our minds to different things. And I know that that looks different for everyone too. So not everyone feels called to this, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And if you also don't believe in anything, that is also okay. You
Yeah.
know? So once again, like there's no right or wrong. There's no trying to put certain beliefs on you. I don't share my beliefs, with other people, and my beliefs have certainly shifted. And if you go do ayahuasca, I bet your beliefs will change as well. You know, so yeah, and that's okay too. So yeah, there's no trying to push anything onto anyone. The other thing I also tell people, and I usually say this on the first session, and it's implied moving forward, and that anything that I share, the card pull, if anything does not resonate, that's fine. If it does, that's also fine. If I give you an interpretation based on what I experienced during the session, especially like depending on what chakra it came through, if that meaning or my interpretation resonates, great. If it doesn't, also great. That's okay too. So once again, it really is like this is about taking the pieces that resonate with you and feel good for you. And sometimes these things come back around years later. I remember during one of my early sessions, there was some past life stuff that came up. And once again, that's like a whole
Mhm.
other thing here that
Yeah.
I don't do a lot with, have some familiarity with, and have experienced a little bit. But she brought up something about a past life, and she's like, "Cool, whatever." And it actually came up in one of my journeys, and I mean, just like really, really crazy. And I was like, "Okay, I remember this from years ago when this was brought up." So, yeah, it doesn't all have to make sense. And once again, this is about we believe that in the session, what is ready to come up will come up. If it's not ready, it will not come up. And if it doesn't resonate, if you decide you are not ready, that is okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. Bottom line for us, a little bit different for Megan, just because she was like chosen. She has these gifts. Of course, she's going to want to use them. It's part of why she's here. But this is another tool to use when you're feeling stuck and when you've tried a whole bunch of things. This is just another tool to use that can be really helpful.
Yeah. And I will say, if you want to start to develop these gifts, I do think there is some natural ability when it comes to some of these gifts. And yeah, there's a lot of things you can do to develop these gifts. It took me, like, for me, like hearing things, that was like the first thing that came to me. And I used to have to be in a bath to be able to like hear anything and connect. And then it turned into kind of an intuitive knowing that things would just like start to come up for me. And then seeing took a while, and it's still a little hit or miss. I've been told some reasons why, which I'm not going to share. They're a little personal here. But the seeing is a hit or miss. It comes and goes a little bit. I've also had, tasting certain things, smelling certain things. There's some very specific scents that I will smell sometimes. Sage is one of them that when I need clearing, I will start to smell sage, and there is no sage going on anywhere near me, and I can smell it. When I need to connect with someone, there's a couple of people in my life that are close to me that for me, have a very particular smell. It's not good or bad. Like it's not like a body odor smell. It's just like
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know. They have a smell.
Yeah, kind of like how every house has a smell.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And then I can smell, that smell starts to come up for me. And that's, it's newer for me. And that's something that, I could choose to develop and don't. It just kind of happens occasionally. The seeing one is something I do actively, pretty actively work on, because I do enjoy that. And that's also, a reason why it's not always there. So, and I've been told that many times, forcefully sometimes. So yeah, just because once again, there is, I think, some innate ability for many people, and just because you don't have an innate gift doesn't mean you can't develop them. A lot of these things are skill and practice. I spent a lot of time, especially in the bathtub, because I really resonate with the water, and that would really just give me the right environment to be able to connect. So yeah, if you're interested in this, there's a lot of tools and resources. I do think Reiki is a great opportunity, a place to get started as well. Make sure to work with a practitioner that resonates with you. And it's pretty readily available, especially level one, level two. There are mastery levels, and once again, there's a few different types of Reiki. And then, yeah, there's a lot of people who talk about opening up your gifts. I'm not really a spiritual type coach when it comes to that and specifics on how to do that. Although, if you want some tips and tricks, I've certainly tried a lot of things, and I can probably give you some if that's of interest to you. And then we, certainly with our clients who are in programs with us, we do energy work and give that option. We also do offer, one or two, one-off kind of sessions that are either 45 minutes or more intensive sessions that are about an hour and 15 minutes. If you're interested in that, you can book a free consult first to figure out which might be the best option for you. Or we'll put some links below as well to my schedule to be able to look into those too. So yeah, those are available. And, once again, interview a few people if you are interested in this and don't kind of feel pulled to one person in particular. And yeah, just it's a great tool.
Yeah. And if you've never, I would suggest having it done in person at least one time to see what it feels like, just to give yourself like have it done virtually and have it done in person and see how it feels. And you also have to be like connected enough, like we were talking about, to actually kind of be able to tune in and feel it. But it's cool to see the difference between the two. From my personal experience, I never, besides like one in-person session, you know, online has been like virtually has been just as strong, if not stronger for me. I tend to feel things like when I have craniosacral therapy work done, because that is like hands-on body work. That one is a little bit more intense for me in person. But yeah, I mean, you just dive in and try it, and I'm sure you'll feel something. Most people do, honestly. I don't know a lot of people who don't, but you also have to be open to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say most people generally, there's a general sense of relaxation kind of
Yes.
afterwards is the biggest thing. I'll also give you a recommendation for afterwards. Drink lots of water, stay very hydrated, kind of like a massage. Like there's a lot of things, whether you consciously or unconsciously know this, there's a lot of things that were moved and shifted. So drink a lot of water. Try and give yourself some extra rest. Like if you can go to bed early, maybe take a nap or just rest a little bit more, especially that day, but even a couple of days following as well, especially if there was a lot that came up for you. Some people do cry, some people do get, a variety of emotions can come up. Some people don't. Some people just feel super great and relaxed and happy. And that's also great.
Yeah, and journaling on it too. Like if you're someone who plans to do it consistently, journaling is super helpful because you can keep track of what came up for you and like what changes are happening down the line as well.
Yeah, it's super interesting, especially if you are going to have several sessions done. The journaling is really interesting because I actually don't, when I have, like I have monthly sessions with a handful of people, and I don't look back at my notes beforehand on purpose. And when we're going through what came up during the session, I'll ask them, hey, didn't something like this come up last session? Or like, weren't we here last session and this shifted? And yeah, it's just really interesting to see some of the progress and different things, and sometimes how things just are reoccurring if we choose not to address them.
Yep, you can see those patterns start to come up. I mean, that's really one of the most useful things from journaling is like seeing your patterns and what keeps presenting itself. Right there, you get great insight to what needs to be addressed. So, huge fan of journaling.
Yes, yeah, such a powerful tool. Actually, I have my journal like literally right next to me right now.
Nice. And keeping them too. Like, I mean, Megan and I have been doing this for a while now. I've kept all of my journals. I probably have at least 7 journals that are just full with like all of the different things that came up for me from where I started to where I am now. And it's sometimes I'll do this when I'm getting ready to set intentions for like the year when it's the new year. I'll look back on all my old ones just to see like how far I've come and the things that have manifested for me and whatnot. That's also really fun too.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, one of the big things I do for the year and then for every single month is I do a card pull and I do a spread. I'll write them down and to reflect back at the end of the month, end of the year. It is really, really interesting. Yeah, just to see and if especially for me, like if cards are repeated,
Yeah.
probably a sign that I need to do a little bit more, spend a little bit more time on some things that I'm not spending the time with.
Yeah, and that's another cool thing about Oracle cards too, just to add to that, is it's kind of like if you've ever heard the saying, ask and you shall receive. I feel like that's a good reference for Oracle cards. Like ask your question and you're gonna get some information on where you need to, whether that's for the year, for the week, for the day, like it doesn't matter. You can use them in any sense like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So cool. Well, yeah, that is energy healing, and hope you learned something. And if you're interested in this, our recommendation would be go for it, interview a few people. But it's a really amazing and powerful tool for healing. So yeah, super great. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. As always, like, follow, subscribe. If it resonates, 5-star reviews mean a lot to us, especially because we're still very new. And so yeah, if that resonates, that would be amazing. We really appreciate it. And be sure to join us next week for our next episode.
Yeah, thanks everyone. See you next time.